Today, you'll hear why North of North is getting so much buzz. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, let me just set up North of North for you real quick. This is a show that takes place in a fictional town called Ice Cove in Nunavut. Our main character, Siaya, is played by Anna Lambe. Here's how Siaya introduces herself in the very first scene of the show.
I am a modern Inuk woman, whatever that means. All my life, I've tried to do everything right. I got married out of high school, started a family, and now he's the town golden boy, and I'm his wife. But it's springtime in the Arctic, which is kind of like our New Year's. And this year, I'm finally putting myself first. I'm gonna get a job, reconnect with friends, be the best mom, and maybe even...
Come on, babe. No one's gonna be looking at you anyways.
That is from the premiere of North of North. That show was filmed entirely in Iqaluit with a largely Inuit cast and crew. You can catch the first couple of episodes right now on CBC Gem. It's going to air also on APTN, and then it's going to make its global debut on Netflix a little bit later this year. Napatsi, Folger, and Sonya Ballantyne have both watched the show, and they're here to talk about it. Napatsi is an Inuk writer at Inuit Art Quarterly. She was born in Iqaluit and raised in both Iqaluit and Vancouver. Sonya Ballantyne is a Swampy Cree filmmaker based in Winnipeg. Sonya, Napatsi, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi. Listen, Napatsi, I'm going to start with you. How did it feel just like seeing your hometown on TV? How did that feel?
It was so wonderful. I don't live in Iqaluit anymore. I'm in Vancouver, so it was really nice to see, my old house is in there. And it was such a pleasure to see the beautiful landscape. Especially here because we don't have snow. So it was nice to kind of feel like I was chilly again.
That's lovely. That's a lovely feeling to be taken to that place and to be taken home, right, on a TV show. You know both of the creators from living in Iqaluit. We're talking about Alethea Arnakuk Baril and Stacey Agluk McDonald. They're also Inuit. What details of the show made it a specifically Inuit show for you as you watch the show?
A lot of it, actually, recognizing that a lot of the actors were actual Inuit. The setting, of course, it being filmed in Nunavut. And I think probably one of the biggest things was the language they used. So it's in English, but they had a lot of Inuktitut sort of naturally in the dialogue. So having that, because in Iqaluit particularly, English is very common, but in the middle of your conversation that's in English, you'll have Inuktitut words or phrases. So that really had an impact. It made it feel very authentic.
Yeah, the idea that sort of like if you feel like you are in the setting as you're watching the show. Sonya, I want to talk a little bit about the comedy in the show, but let me just play you a scene from the first episode. Let's hear this.
Do you know you're here? No. You don't deserve him.
You know what, Lucy? If you love Tink so much, why don't you go screw him?
Gross! He's my cousin!
So hard to remember who's related. Come, this way.
I mean, look, yeah, the comedy in the show is raunchy. It's surprising at times. Did it work for you, Sonya? Did it work as you were watching the first couple episodes?
Very much so, because I am a huge advocate for Indigenous representation in film and television. But when people hear that, they think I mean like the highbrow, like Oscar-winning, like the honorable, stoic portrayals of Indigenous people. But what I really want is stuff like this that shows us as our lives are actually lived. And so I was so surprised to hear the raunchiness in the show, and I was just like, the second I heard a raunchy joke in the first episode, I was like, I am here for this. And I sat down a little bit harder, and like it won me over immediately, and I was just like cackling out loud the whole time. It was great.
I gotta say, a moment that really stuck with me, Napatsi, from the first episode, is when Siaya's mom, Siaya's the main character, when her mom when Sia's very angry and she's like trying to like walk out the room, and her mom kind of yells after her, "You're acting like a white girl with options." And you know, you just kind of imagine like the amount of humor that it took just to arrive at that line. And I want to talk a little bit about Sia, because she introduces herself as a, quote, a modern Inuk woman, whatever that means. What was your reaction hearing that phrase and hearing that character introduce herself in that way to set up, you know, the arc of this whole show?
I thought it was really great because I think for Indigenous people, like Sonya had mentioned earlier, the way we're portrayed in media often is this sort of stereotypical way from outsiders' perspectives. So, and me working in Inuit art, I see a lot of that applied to Inuit. This is what Inuit are like. People envision us sort of in the past as hunters and, you know, seamstresses, which we still are, of course, but there's so much more depth to what we are now. And modern Inuit are very different from our traditional counterparts in the past. And so we have to face that all the time when we're outside of community, is talking to people, and they're always surprised that, you know, that I'm wearing a t-shirt or that I don't have braids in. So that kind of thing. I thought it was really fantastic that was sort of like one of the very first lines in the show, was showing that sort of understanding that people don't know what we're like necessarily, and this is going to show what that is.
Yeah, like Sia is like a very rich character who just in the first episode goes through, let's say, a lot of roller coasters without like necessarily spoiling anything. Ending with, you know, a moment where I literally yelped at the end of the first episode. I was like, "What? Where is this gonna go?" But I wanna sit a little bit more in Sia because Rosanna Deerchild hosted both the show creators and the lead actress on her show Unreserved recently, and here's what one of the show creators, Alethea, had to say about this main character, about Sia. Let's listen to this.
I don't know about other Indigenous communities, but with Inuit communities, what we've found over the course of our lives is there's often a lot of forgiveness for men who mess up, and not as much forgiveness for women. Yep. And we really wanted to have a really likable, warm, funny, awesome female character that really messes up sometimes. You know, her community backs her up and lets her mess up and forgives her and makes her better, because that's what we want to see in our own communities too.
A character whose community lets her mess up and forgives her. Sonya, what do you make of that when you hear it?
I think it was one of the reasons I love the show so much, because there is often this, for lack of a better word, babying of Indigenous men in our communities, and less forgiveness for women in general, just because there is this pursuit of perfectionism in our community. And whenever and I'm certain this is a big part of the Inuk community as well. I can only speak for myself as a Cree person, but there is like this pursuit of perfection that makes it hard, because you can never be perfect. And when you inevitably fail, people are like, "Oh, look at like little Sonya couldn't do it. Little Sonya couldn't make it that far." And it was fun to see an Indigenous man portrayed as a villain in the show, like not as like a mustache twirling villain, but as a person who is nuanced and allowed to have negative qualities. Because I think it's very cool to portray Indigenous people as a whole, well, not as a whole, but as like all of the pieces of us, because as you were saying, like there is this idea that we're portrayed as a dead people, and so as a dead people we're only allowed to be portrayed in a positive way. And so I think it was such an amazing thing to see us portrayed in such a for lack of a better word, messy way. And I think that is so enriching to me as a person, because I'm like, yes, finally we can mess up on TV. And like one of my favorite parts of the show is alcoholism and alcohol in general are always demonized in our community, and like rightfully so, because there is like alcoholism in our communities. But to see young people doing what young people do and having parties where Britney Spears plays and having booze and shots was just something I like to see, just because it's like, it is a part of our community, and to pretend it isn't is disingenuous to us. And so I just loved all of it. And plus they played my favorite Lauryn Hill song at the beginning of the episode. So I was like, okay, no matter what happens, I'm here for it until all the episodes have aired.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, that was such a beautiful needle drop, that moment when that Lauryn Hill song shows up. I gotta say, Napatsi, I want to go deeper into that idea that Sonya just raised, the idea that this show allows characters who don't often get to be messy to be messy and forgiven. What do you make of that? What do you make of what Alethea was saying and what Sonya just added to it?
I 100% agree with Sonya. I think it was a great choice because not only are the men, or one man in particular, portrayed in a way that Indigenous men aren't typically shown, even in writing and things like that, but women are often shown as, these like powerful, perfect women. So it was really nice to see Aya doing these things that were, ultimately going to be good for her, I hope. But that she didn't do it perfectly, and that she, had to stay at her mom's place. So I think it's really important, especially for people who are in these kind of relationships that are not healthy for them, to be able to see that you can do that, and that you can do it not quite perfectly and come out of it still having strong relationships with your community and family.
Napatsi, when you say not quite perfectly, that is the understatement of the year, I think, just given how this first episode plays out, but also it is so incredibly funny, just like as an outburst. I don't want to spoil the show, so I'm going to not spoil the show. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion, and today we are talking about the incredibly funny new sitcom North of North, which is set in a fictional remote town called Ice Cove in Nunavut. Look, this show was entirely filmed in Iqaluit. They converted the curling rink into a gigantic set. I want you guys to hear from the creators, Alethea and Stacey, on how they managed to make a show in a remote city.
We're a fly-in community. Our set had to be built and designed in advance, and then torn down and then put onto an airplane and flown to Iqaluit and then reassembled. And we don't have transportation vans, so like the taxi company in town stepped in and helped us out for transportation, for production. And
our local shawarma shop did all the food for 3 months for a 100-person crew. It was awesome.
Also a lot of Inuit crew in each department where they have special access to things and information that, even our most experienced heads of departments would never know.
100-person crew having shawarma for 3 months. That's a lot of shawarma, I gotta say. Napatsi, what have you heard from folks back home about the impact of filming a big show, in an 8,000-person city?
I heard a few things, most not really in person. I saw it on social media a bit. There's Inuit are on Facebook a lot still. And I'm still part of a lot of the community chat groups. So I saw some stuff where, it was difficult for folks if the crew was parked in town, taking up space.
Sure.
But what really impressed me was how quickly, Alethea and Stacey actually responded to that personally, and making sure that everyone had access to them, and saying, if there's a problem with the crew or with the filming, please reach out to us immediately and we'll deal with it right away. And that's really the only interaction I had with any sort of negativity about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly a lot of excitement and positivity.
I was going to say,
excited.
It would really just change the vibe in your town, in an 8,000-person town, when you just have a gigantic show like this one filming. I just want to go real quick, 30 seconds to each of you. Sonya, let me ask you about your hopes for the show as, it sort of rolls out on CBC and APTN and then Netflix a little bit later this year.
I'm hoping it becomes kind of like a Sex in the City for Indigenous people. I think Mohawk Girls was a lot similar in terms of Indigenous representation in ways I had never seen it, because I think the advancement of Inuk people, Cree people, Mohawk people is in its portrayal of us as living people still, like including our cultural teachings and our cultural backgrounds, like making a big picture that we're still here and we're still thriving and we're modern while also keeping our connections to the land and traditional culture. So I'm just hoping that when it gets onto Netflix, it's inevitably embraced by the rest of the world, and I hope it becomes bigger than like something like Schitt's Creek or Corner Gas. I hope it takes the place of Canada in Corner. Like I hope North becomes our version of like Corner Gas and stuff. So here's hoping.
That's a beautiful hope. Napatsi, 30 seconds to you, and then we got to leave it there. What are your hopes for the show?
Similar to Sonya, I really want it to go for multiple seasons. I was just so excited to watch it and really disappointed that there was only 2 episodes available.
Me too. Yes.
Yeah.
When I talked about it with my husband after, he was like, "This is way better than North of 60." And we both love North of 60, but I was like, yeah, it is.
Yeah. I think that is a perfect place to leave it. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a delight. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Napatsi Folger is an Inuk writer at Inuit Art Quarterly. She was born in Iqaluit and raised in both Iqaluit and Vancouver. Sonya Ballantyne is a Swampy Cree filmmaker based in Winnipeg. And by the way, you can catch interviews with both of the show's creators on Unreserved and on Q. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. All right, look, we are going to switch gears now and talk about a movie that is getting a lot of buzz. I want to start by asking you a question quickly. Like, think some of your favorite movie villains. Who comes to mind for you? Maybe it's Darth Vader. I don't know. Maybe it's Scar from The Lion King. I don't know who comes to mind for you. But I'm asking because Vulture writer Devon Ivie says that one of the best movie bad guys of all time makes an appearance in the new Netflix family movie Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl. She's talking, by the way, about Feathers McGraw, the claymation penguin that also happens to be a criminal mastermind. You know the one. Devon is here to make her case. Devon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very passionate about this penguin, so any excuse to chat, I'm thrilled, my friend. Thanks.
Yeah, you're like, this is the day to talk about Feathers McGraw. Okay, let me get to Feathers McGraw in a moment, but maybe let's explain to people what is happening here, because maybe it's been a minute since you've heard from Wallace and Gromit, but then there's this new movie, it airs on the BBC on Christmas Day, gets like more than 9 million viewers just on that day.
So many.
And then it's now on Netflix, here in Canada, it's in the top 10 movies on Netflix. For people who may be not familiar with Wallace and Gromit, can you just give us just a bit of background on how we got here?
Absolutely. So I would argue that Wallace and Gromit has been the most significant British import over the past 3 decades. I mean, It debuted in 1989 as a short film, and it's amazing that it got to this level in the cultural pantheon because there's only been 6 Wallace and Gromit releases since 89. There's been 4 short films and 2 full-fledged feature films. And it speaks to just this very innate Britishness of these 2 characters, Wallace and Gromit. And I would argue, more importantly, it's made with the most beautiful art animation form, claymation, which, as you probably know, takes a painstaking amount of detail. And you see these behind-the-scenes videos in which they move these clay models at microscopic degrees of precision, and it takes years to create. So, all of these narratives that Wallace and Gromit have gone through over the years, it takes a lot of labor of love, and it shows what we see as the final result, for sure.
I gotta say, for how embedded Wallace and Gromit are just in general pop culture references, I would have thought there would have been way more Wallace and Gromit, different movies, because in my head I'm like, there's been 40 for sure, and you're like, no, actually it's not been that many, because
and there's been a lot of spin-offs too. I mean, the same studio, Aardman Animation, you probably know Shaun the Sheep. That's equally popular. There's been 2 Shaun the Sheep films, actually, a whole series. They did Chicken Run as well. There's been some offshoots, but Wallace and Gromit is definitely the big kahunas here for Aardman.
Okay, so then we get to this new one, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl. Quickly, what is the plot of Vengeance Most Fowl?
So it's not a direct sequel of sorts. So in 93, there was a short film called The Wrong Trousers where Feathers McGraw has been introduced.
Your
and
man,
at the end of the
Feathers
film, he
McGraw.
gets apprehended, turns into a jailbird, and gets locked up at the zoo. Now it's 2025. This was released at the end of 2024. And Wallace and Gromit, Wallace is in his inventions mode. It creates a legion of smart robots because he is now, some would say, overly dependent on technology. And Gromit, the more practical, stoic figure in his life, isn't exactly thrilled about this. And Feathers uses this opportunity of this smart robot to finally get his vengeance Most Fowl on Wallace and Gromit and reprograms the robots from being good to evil. So as with most Wallace and Gromit films, there is that additional layer of societal commentary for the adults in the room.
Yes, of course.
And he gets his revenge with the use of these robots and escapes the jail and plots a big grand finale. I mean, it's really wonderful to see.
I guess I should remind people, for people who have not maybe seen Wallace and Gromit, Wallace is an inventor. Gromit is a dog. Like you should. That's a dynamic that people should know about, just in case you're thinking about like two grumpy characters.
Like,
in there,
Wallace, very quintessential British-looking man. It's like the person who did the clay just put their index finger in. Very expressive, very quintessential British teeth and mouth, I may say. It has a lot of book smarts. He is a very prolific inventor, and his inventions are fully realized in all these films. Gromit is a dog. He is a very cute beagle, but is anthropomorphic. And just has a lot of human tendencies. So he often has to get Wallace out of trouble with certain things, let's say, that he tends to overlook with the lack of street smarts.
Okay, but now I want to get to your mans. I want to get to Feather. I want to get to Feather McGraw because, and the reason I want to is because A, he's a penguin. B, he's a penguin who doesn't speak. That doesn't often lend. Those are not qualities that lend themselves to making one of the best villains of all time. What makes him such a great villain?
Well, it's because for the reasons you just said, when you think of a penguin in any visual medium, you think, oh, happy feet. They're waddling around with their flippers. They're very cute. They're cuddly. We love penguins. I love any and all penguins. This is the exact opposite. When, I had the pleasure of recently speaking with Nick Park about this character, and he was saying in the development,
Nick Park is a creator of Wallace and Gromit
with The Wrong Trousers. His specific set of rules was, this is going to be a frightening penguin. He is going to be violent by intent. Visually, he will not waddle. He described it with like a milk bottle gait. He walks with purpose, slowly, very small,
menacingly.
Not a lot of clay.
Yes.
They even use like the bottom parts of thumbtacks as his eyes. So you just see a blank black, two little dots for his eyes.
You do.
So there's a lot of interiority there. He doesn't emote much. It's like they described it as like De Niro in Cape Fear. He takes a lot of time observing. So he's not flailing around like a cute little penguin. And on top of that, it should be said, he is violent. I mean, we think of Wallace and Gromit as children's films, which is not true. I think that's a misconception. They're very smart for the whole family. You have all these layers of narratives and visual gags that anyone could appreciate at any age. But in both films, famously in The Wrong Trousers, he banishes a gun out of nowhere in his flippers and shoots at our two protagonists. And in this one as well, without giving away too much of the plot details, he gets Gromit in a chokehold and starts to choke him with the stick of an umbrella. So it is, with all of that in mind, this is not a cute penguin villain. He was very deliberately crafted to be the antithesis of what anyone would think of as just a penguin in cinema, to put it like that.
I know no one should be confused. Like, the fact that it's claymation does not make Feathers McGraw any less terrifying. Like, I mean, like,
100%. Like, we gotta get that out there right now. 60-year-olds watch this, they will be terrified. And Gruber, as you said, Vader, McGraw needs to be in this conversation immediately.
Yeah, it's right below Gruber. That's where we should be putting this particular character. Listen, Devon, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you watching Wallace and Gromit, and I'm going to go home and watch it tonight with my kid. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Pleasure's mine, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Devon Ivie is a staff writer at Vulture. She's in New York. Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl is streaming on Netflix now. And I got to tell you, I'm never going to think about penguins the same, or specifically maybe Feathers McGraw. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We are going to be back tomorrow. We'll see you then.